Welcome to Podsauce, your podcast discovery show. I'm Dax Holt.
I'm Alicia Renee.
And we're going to jump right into it. We got Dan Taberski, who is the host of 9/12, which is an amazing podcast all about the aftermath of 9/11. Not so much the day, but what happened to society, to culture, the country after 9/11.
People trying to pivot, move on. How do we move on? And what I really liked about this podcast, welcome to the Podsauce, Dan. Hi, Dan.
Oh, hey, whatever. Hi.
We just went right into the bones of it, but that's really, it is really indicative to how good your show is. It actually was my pick way back last year, so I got an eye for talent, kid, and I see you. I see you.
That's great. Thank you. I appreciate that.
But your show was your podcast is so beautifully put together because I really like the episode where, comedians are talking about how do they bring back funny, right? How do we laugh in a time and in a space where everyone is asking questions, people are mourning, people are scared, people are angry, right? How do you make light of a time like that? What made you want to do 9/12?
I mean, I was in New York when 9/11 happened. I lost a friend, but I was also a born and raised New Yorker and sort of experiencing this thing firsthand. I was also working at The Daily Show at the time, and so comedy was top of mind. And it really did feel like there was no way to be funny anymore. Yeah. Like, it's such a strange, it almost sounds stupid. Of course humor is not dead. Of course you're going to be able to be funny. But it really did feel like, things are different now. Like, there's nothing funny about this. And I don't see a way out of that sort of darkness. And it really was a question that people were asking, that we were asking ourselves, how do you be funny?
Dan, when I was listening to your podcast, I thought it was really interesting the way you started it. Episode 1. You started it with a group of people who basically had no idea that it happened, and how they found out and how they were secluded from the world. I don't want to be too specific because it is really interesting and I want people to hear that for themselves. But they essentially had to cope with this massive, trauma weeks and weeks after the rest of the world and what that was like for them.
They had to catch up in grief.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, why did you decide to start with their storyline?
We didn't want to. There's almost none, if any at all, audio from the actual day of 9/11 in the podcast, in all 7 episodes. And that was by design because we didn't want to just sort of wallow in the sort of terror porn and bring back that feeling. It felt a little exploitative. We just didn't want to do it. And so we were trying to figure out a new way to approach it, but we were also trying to figure out a new way to get people into the shock of it. That we were realizing that it was hard for people, like if you were 18 years old listening to our podcast, you weren't alive then, it's hard to really land the idea of how absolutely shocking it was. Yes. And so we found that by talking to people who hadn't been, because they were so secluded, they hadn't been able to see it for months after it happened, that they were able to describe it in a way that was almost more visceral than people who had seen it over and over and over and over and over again. They had processed it in a different way, where it was more about the feeling of it. And when they saw it for the first time, they could really describe what was strange about it without the shock. It was just a different way to remember the shock without sort of overdosing on the sort of like just horror.
You hit it on the nail there, because one of them described it as an arrow, like the plane going into the building was like an arrow entering whatever, the body or something.
It was like a straw going into a cup.
Yeah. It was. Yeah. And the way that was described, you're so right, was spot on, that maybe if you've seen it 100 times, you don't look at it like that anymore. You look at the explosion, you look at the craziness of the
Well,
event.
also, if you've seen it 100 times, we realize that your experience is so mediated by the media that you've seen that you're not actually describing what you saw or what you experienced. You're describing what you saw weeks and months afterwards.
Yeah.
You're describing how it felt to be watching it over and over.
Yeah.
It's really impossible to sort of separate those two things. So they were really able to pinpoint the moment
and the energy.
It was isolated. Yeah.
Are you hearing from some of the fans of the podcast about maybe they are direct survivors of 9/11 and listening to your podcast has maybe helped them or been therapeutic in any way? I'm just curious. I'm curious because when you're doing such a big, heavy topic, but you're diving deep into it, if it's helping a certain group of people that they are now reaching out to you.
It's not so much the people who are involved directly in the day. It's more just regular people who feel a little weird about 9/11 and like a little weird about remembering 9/11, and it's sort of like a little weird about the idea of never forget and how it feels a little political, but you can't quite put your finger on it, and you're kind of embarrassed to sink too deep into that because it means all these other things, like never forget what? Never forget the war we started, never forget that day, never forget what we did to Muslim Americans after the fact. Like, what is it that we're never forgetting? And a lot of people, I think there's a complication to the feelings of 9/11 that maybe before the 20-year anniversary was harder to talk about because you really want to be respectful to what people actually experienced and the loss that people felt. But that now we're a little farther away. We're like, all right, what are we doing now? Like, where do we put this? And I think people were ready for that in a way that maybe they hadn't thought. And those are the people I hear from. They're just like, that it expressed something that they hadn't quite put their finger on, that makes them sort of hold it differently now.
9/12, is this therapy for you, Dan? Is this therapy,
No.
or is this more so just curiosity, exploration, wanting to capture these moments that other people experienced for other people to hopefully learn from, grow from, get strength from? What is 9/12 for you?
It's like a lot of people, I have mixed feelings. That day was horrible, and there was a lot of pain, a lot of grief. I lost people, and yet what came after and the politics of it and the wars and all that stuff, you really get a split personality about how you think about that day. And so it was just trying to synthesize those things and sort of put it together in a way that I could feel comfortable and express and really sort of just decide how I feel about it now. So I wouldn't call it therapy, but I approached it really openly, and I wasn't sure what the answer was. Where do you put 9/11 now? How do we talk about it? Having spent all the time with it, and I feel like I've landed a place where I'm comfortable, and so maybe that's therapy, but like it's really useful for me. I'm really grateful for it.
I mean, 9/11 is a really heavy topic, and not just that
Totally.
day, but your podcast in general about the repercussions of that day and how it affected so many people differently around the country, their nationality, whatever the case is. How do you stay positive or light when your whole world is consumed by such a heavy, heavy topic?
I don't know, I think that it helped let me put it this way. I laughed harder on this project than I've laughed harder on a lot of projects. Like doing that episode about humor during 9/11 and like what was funny and what wasn't funny and like what were the bad jokes that you couldn't say then that you could say now. Like a lot. It would be different if I was talking about, I wouldn't go to Ukraine today and laugh. But there's something about distance that allows us that allows me to have, it's not having fun with it, but it's just like acknowledging that other things have happened. The world has moved on. Like, it's a lot of people weren't even alive for this. Like, a lot of it is just laughing at how serious we were.
Yeah.
A lot of it is just laughing at the devil because you're alive and a lot of people aren't. Like, a lot of that is just like happiness to be alive. And so I like laughing at really dark things. If you do it, it's hard. It's a needle to thread.
Yeah.
But for me, that's like, I always try to find what's funny about really sad things. And then for really funny things, I try to find what's sad about them, because it's that combination of those feelings that I think feels the most human to me.
Absolutely. Dan, you are a huge podcaster. This is not your only podcast. You've been a part of some other big ones like Surviving Y2K, Missing Richard Simmons, so many others. So
that was one you really liked.
Yeah, Missing Richard Simmons. Check it out. But you're involved in the podcast world. Are there any podcasts that you yourself are listening to right now that you would recommend to other people to check out?
Gosh, I wasn't ready for this. It's funny. I listen to a lot of interview podcasts. I really like Ezra Klein. His last episode, I listened to the Ezra Klein show. His last episode yesterday, hour and a half, just like at least 50 moments in that podcast where I was like, holy shit, like that's intense. Like, it's a great, great show. In terms of narrative podcasts, have you guys talked about Forever is a Long Time?
No, what's that about? Talk to me.
Put it on the list. Put it on the list.
Writing it down, Dan.
5 episodes is basically a guy who just got, I think his name's Ian Cross. I don't remember his name. We've talked. Because podcasters, you just like email each other and you're like, hey, we should talk. And then you do, because that's sort of like the podcast code. But it's a great, beautiful podcast where he sort of talks to every member of his family whose marriage ended in divorce as a way to sort of process his own relatively young marriage and how you approach it in a sort of upfront, realistic way and yet keep it together. It's sort of beautiful and simple, super simple, and I love it. It's a great podcast.
Real quick, Dan, because I'm always really curious, especially when we speak to content creators who are involved in, a plethora of different podcasts. What podcast got you hooked into the podcast space, if there was one?
I mean, Serial was the one that I had listened to, but that's not what I was more interested in documentary in film and then podcasting just became a way to tell some of these stories that didn't quite lend themselves to film, that the getting rid of the visuals and really doubling down on the audio and the sound of it allowed me to tell stories in a way, especially Missing Richard Simmons, like that I never would have been able to do otherwise. And so that's how I stumbled into it, and now I love it.
Yeah,
Dan,
Serial
fun
got
fact,
so many
I
of us.
saw Richard Simmons a month before he disappeared. I got to hang out with him at a party.
So did
Is he disappeared or is he just at home wanting y'all to leave him alone?
He got out of the public spotlight.
Listen to the podcast and find out.
Yeah, it was wild.
Dan, is he just wanting to be unbothered, Dan? Give me a wink if I'm...
I don't know. Richard Simmons is at home. Oh, I can tell you, Richard Simmons is at home. Yeah.
Is he alive? Is he with us?
Not as far as I know. Yeah. I mean, I'm in touch with occasionally with the people who worked with him still. Like, yeah. But it doesn't mean that him checking out from being the most public figure ever in a day wasn't still the craziest thing that ever happened.
Fair.
100%.
That's fair.
And so, yes, but he, as far as I know, he's fine, and this is the life he's wanted to live. And God, I could not wish him more luck.
He just wants y'all to leave him alone. Dan Taberski, host of 912. I put y'all onto this a long time ago, so it's what we do. It is a Pineapple Street Studio production.
And huge congrats, Dan, for winning the Ambie, the 2022 Ambie Award. That is a huge deal, probably the biggest recognition
I'm not
in
surprised.
podcasts.
I've been telling y'all to
massive
check out
congratulations.
912 last year. Dan, talk
Thank
to me,
you.
Dan. Talk to me.
Thank you.
Congratulations, all jokes aside.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Pineapple Street Studios. You guys clearly know what you're doing over there. And don't go anywhere, guys. We have more. This is Podsauce. Dax has a done in a day.
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 Hey,
Hey.
hey,
Hey.
hey. Done in a
Almost.
day.
Done in a day. You got a done in a day pick for us,
I got a
Steve?
done in a day for us.
What you got?
For someone who is first discovering us. A done in a day is a podcast that is quick, it's easy, you're in, you're out, and you can finish it in a day. All right, so my done in a day this week is very scary people. Are you familiar with the Amityville murders?
Yes.
So this is a podcast that dives into that situation where 6 family members of the DeFeo family were killed, shot face down in their beds. The oldest son was the only one who survived the situation.
He done did it.
Let's keep going.
He done did it.
So this podcast is actually also a sneaky celeb podcast because Donnie Wahlberg hosts it.
Not Donnie.
Donnie!
Hey, D. Like I know him. Hey, D.
So this is quick. It's a 6-part series. They get in, they get out. The episodes are short. They're about 35 to 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And they retell the story and kind of dive a little deeper. You hear interviews with the oldest son and his.
He's still with us?
I don't know if where these audio recordings were from.
Okay.
But you hear him talking. You hear him describing the scene and seeing his parents shot dead, his siblings shot dead, and running out of the house and all of that. So, if you are into murder and mayhem and true crime,
Murder most foul.
and Donnie Wahlberg, you're gonna love
Not and Donnie.
very scary people. This is my done in a day. Like I said, it's fast, it's easy, and it is digestible.
Do they know who did it? Who
So
committed the murder?
I will tell you that each episode they kind of dig in. They find out like basically their connections with I want to say like a mobster, and then they also so they were like this picture perfect family. However, there was a lot of violence behind the scenes. So that's what I think they're taking a look at in this podcast is a deeper dive rather than just what's been splashed out all over the news.
Do they mention at all who done did it?
I don't know. You're gonna have to listen to it, Leisha. Why are you always looking for the quick, easy way out?
Because I like shortcuts. That's why we do this show. This show is a shortcut to the podcasting space. You guys go to podsauce.com. We're going to put Jax's Done in the Day pick up there. And one more time, what's it called for all
It
the
is
good
called
people?
Very Scary People. Thank you guys for being with us. As we continue through the show, you've got a pod ooh la la.
Pod oh la la.
I kind of like pod ooh la la.
I didn't ask that. I named it. It's going to be Pod oh la la. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. My Pod oh la la pick is This Is Dating. I really like this podcast. It's basically you become a voyeur on blind dates.
Oh, there's nothing more awkward than a blind date.
1,000%.
So this sounds like something I don't listen to.
1,000%. One particular episode that I really enjoyed was Chemistry Date with Virginia. This is date 1. And Virginia, hilarious. She's a 30-something-year-old lawyer. I feel you, Virginia. I didn't go all the way, girl, but I feel you. And it just basically talks about, it covers the date that she went on. She's been on 50-plus dates. And then another one, I didn't listen to this episode yet, but I'm looking forward to it. It's The List with Aziz.
Okay.
So they have his first date, mainly because I'm really curious of what that space looks like. For men, do men create lists? I mean, do you remember that space? And I say that
I was
because
in high school.
I was about to say Dax and his wife have been together
half my friends
since
have
high school.
been married since high school.
Oh, that got awkward.
Don't worry, we can make it unawkward. Hey, This Is Dating. Do you have a spot open for a leash to stop by the old podcast?
Come on our show. For those of you who are listening, you guys really got to check out the visual aspect to this show, because that awkward moment where Dax and I just looked at each other like, yeah, no, you don't know anything about this. Dax has been out of these dating streets for his whole life. God bless him. I hate you. Moving on. You guys should check out the podcast. This Is Dating. That is my pod. Oh la la.
And if you would like to see how this went down, head on over to our YouTube page where you can check out the visual aspect of this show.
Yes.
Make sure you like, subscribe, follow all the things.
All the things.
This is Podsauce. All right, it's that time of the show when you can go back to doing dishes and not paying attention because it's Leash Pick.
You are so rude. Oh my gosh, you were disgustingly rude. I don't even know like what happened to you this morning when you got out of bed. But anywho, it is my time to shine because there are some of us that are depending on their own wits to bring stuff to the table. Mine is called Small Town Murder. Basically, it's hosted by two comedians. It's very comparable to you guys. If you don't know, one of my favorite podcasts out there is It's Always the Husband. I love the comedic perspective that Megan and Sarah, bring every episode. They break down reenactments of crime, murder, kills. And these two comedians, both males, they break down like true crime stories about small towns, what makes the town tick. We all know everyone in small towns 9 times out of 10 know one another. Certain important officials tend to hold multiple jobs.
Yeah.
So, from a comedic perspective, obviously with being respectful to the deceased, they talk about true crime. So basically, yeah, if you like
sounds
comedy.
Like, I was gonna say, sounds like if you like this, you'll like that.
Yeah, it sounds like if you like It's Always the Husband, which you should, then you will like Small Town Murders.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
great recommendation.
This I know. I know this.
Adequate recommendation by Leash once again.
It went from good to adequate. Such a hater.
I'm just kidding. That was a good one. Make sure you guys, if you haven't headed on over to podsauce.com, there is a lot of stuff that we don't even talk about on the show over there. You break down different podcasts, different recommendations. There is so much content on there that I think you can really get lost if you are into podcasts.
100%.
And make sure you follow us on social media. We're on YouTube, we're on Facebook, Instagram, everywhere.
All the things.
All the things. Make sure you're liking, subscribing to our YouTube page because that's where we're really bringing the heat with all of this. You can find me at Dax Holt.
You can find me at I Am Alicia Renee. And until next time, thank you all so much for joining us. Be good to yourself.